All right, so moving on to order of operations, there's an acronym, PEMDAS, or Please Excuse My Dear Aunt Sally, to help people remember what order you have to perform mathematical operations in. The P technically stands for parentheses, but it could actually be any grouping symbol. And we'll see later on that things like brackets or absolute values might also be grouping symbols. So you always do parentheses first. The E stands for exponents. And then the M and the D go together. They stand for multiplying and dividing. And you always do those operations from left to right. The A and the S also go together. They stand for adding and subtracting. And again, you want to do that from left to right unless you change everything to addition. Addition is something that you can do in any order. So let's see how this works with some examples. In example A, I don't see any parentheses. I don't see any exponents. So step 3, I have to multiply. 2 times 14 is 28. So now I've got 3 minus 28. That's the same thing as 3 plus negative 28. Opposite signs, so I subtract. And let's see, 28 minus 3 is 25. And the answer is going to be negative, as the 28 is bigger than 3. Okay, in example B, I have to do parentheses first. So 6 minus 4 is 2. And then these bars that you see, the straight bars, are absolute value bars. They work like parentheses. So I'm going to do the operation inside those bars first. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. I did the 4 minus 6 in my head. Technically, it's 4 plus negative 6. Opposite signs, so I subtract. As you start doing more and more subtraction, you can start to kind of just think of that minus sign as being attached to the 6, attached to the number behind it. And so when I look at this in my head, I'm thinking positive 4, negative 6, and that's how I was able to get the negative 2 quickly. Now, those straight bars are absolute values, and that simply means the magnitude or the distance from the origin. Or I think the simplest way of thinking about it is you make the number positive. So if the number is negative, you make it positive. If the number is positive, it stays positive. So absolute values, those straight bars, just make numbers positive. And so the next thing I would do is I'm still trying to get rid of that grouping symbol. So I would do that absolute value next. So let's see, I've got 2 squared minus 3. And because there's no symbol between the 3 and the absolute value, that actually means we're multiplying. Multiplication is the one operation where you don't have to put a symbol there. If you see 2 numbers just right next to each other, like the 3 next to that absolute value or 3 next to a parenthesis, it means you're multiplying. Now, absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. So all of the work I've done right now was step 1, my grouping symbols. Step 2, I do the exponents. 2 squared means 2 times 2, that's 4. And then I'm on step 3, I'm going to multiply. 3 times 2 is 6. And then finally I can do the subtraction. 4 minus a negative 6 should be negative 2. All right, in part C, we have a square root. And I'm actually going to scroll back up to where I wrote down the PEMDAS instructions. It turns out square roots are actually a special kind of exponent. You can think of it as like an inverse square. And so I'm going to put that into step 2 with exponents. So square roots, we do it the same kind of time we would do exponents. So back to part C. There are no parentheses or grouping symbols. So step 2 is exponents. That square root is like an exponent. Notice the 2 is just in front of the square root. There's no symbol there. That means we're multiplying. So I'll put a little dot. And square root of 9 is basically asking us what number squared equals 9. And once again, I really just need to know that times table. Let's see, what number squared is 9? Oh, the answer is 3. 3 squared is 9. So square root of 9 is 3. All right, so we did our exponents. Now we have to multiply or divide. 2 times 3 is 6. And to finish, 5 plus 6 is 11. Okay, I have one more order of operations example. Let's take a look at example D. Step 1 is parentheses or grouping symbols. And when you see a fraction bar like this, you can kind of think that there are actually parentheses around the numerator and the denominator. We actually have to figure out what number's in the numerator and what number is in the denominator before we can do the division. So this fraction bar here is basically a grouping symbol. It's separating or grouping the top and the bottom. So I'm going to do the top and the bottom separately, and then I'll do the division. So in the top, I've got minus 11 plus 2 times 4. I always multiply before I add or subtract. So 2 times 4 is 8. Minus 11 plus 8 is minus 3. So that's the numerator. On the bottom, 6 divided by 3 minus 1. I always multiply or divide first before I add or subtract. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then 2 minus 1 is 1. So the denominator is a 1. And so in this problem, I'm left with negative 3 divided by 1. That is just negative 3. All right, finally, the last thing I want to go over in this first lesson is working with algebraic expressions, because that's really what we're going to be doing this semester. This course is kind of an introduction to algebra, working with the variables, letters. And so the first thing I want to talk about is how we can evaluate an expression for specific variables. So for example, if I tell you that x equals negative 4 and y equals 3, and we want to evaluate these expressions in parts A and B, all that means is we just have to plug the numbers in to the expression given. So in this first one, we've got a 12 minus 3. That no symbol between the 3 and the x means we're multiplying. And so instead of the x, I am going to just put a negative 4 in there, and then it's squared. So what I've basically done here is I took the x and I replaced it with a negative 4. I usually use parentheses when I'm plugging variables or numbers in for variables. I think it's a good idea to get in the habit of always using parentheses. It'll help you keep track of the fact that, oh, this is actually multiplication, and I think you'll avoid making mistakes. So now we have to use order of operations to finish this problem. We have to do parentheses. There isn't really anything to do inside the parentheses, so I'm going to move on to the exponent. So I've got a negative 4 squared. Let me write that out. That means we're taking negative 4 times negative 4. That's going to be a positive 16. Same sign, a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so now this becomes 12 minus 3. There's no symbol, so that's multiplying, times 16. Notice when I'm doing order of operation problems, I actually rewrite the entire problem every time I do some math, and that helps me keep track of things, especially when the problems start to get a little bit more complicated. Okay, so now I have to multiply before I can subtract, so I have to figure out what is 16 times 3. 6 times 3 is 18. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, so 48. 12 minus 48 is the same as 12 plus negative 48. So my answer is definitely going to be negative. 48 minus 12 is 36. So negative 36 is my final answer here. We can do the exact same thing in part B. This time we've got an x and a y. And so in the directions above, they say y is 3, so I'm going to replace the y with a 3. And I like to use parentheses there. That's going to help me see that, that's actually multiplication. There was no symbol between the 2 and the y, so I'm multiplying. And then minus x is negative 4, and y is 3. So everywhere I saw an x, I put in a negative 4. Everywhere I saw a y, I put in a 3. So I have to do parentheses. Oh, there's nothing to do in the parentheses. Then I have to do exponents. No exponents. Now I multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. And then I'm going to copy down this subtraction. And then negative 4 times positive 3 is a negative 12. And now we can subtract. Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. So 6 plus 12 is 18, and that is my final answer. So that's it for this first lesson. I know there was a lot of information in this video. I went pretty quickly because the idea is hopefully you've seen some of this stuff. Maybe it was a very long time ago when you've seen it, but hopefully this was a little bit of a review for you. If not, please feel free to send me an email or drop by office hours. I'm more than happy to go over this stuff with you a little bit more slowly. But just to reiterate, we are going to be doing arithmetic all semester long, and so it's really important to get caught up with this stuff now, since it's only going to continue to build. So let me know if you have any questions, and I think you are ready to move on to the My Math Lab homework and then that worksheet.